Everybody, welcome back to another Productivity Like a Pro podcast episode today. Again, with my dear friend Paco Cantero, our co-founder, and myself, Tom Solid, with the dear members inside the chat, going along, giving questions along the way about the topic. What's the difference between a task manager, a calendar, and a planner? And we cannot emphasize enough that there is a difference, and we see it over and over again, especially when we come to tool comparison tools, that they are all in the same category. Not all, but at least calendar and planner, or planner and task manager. So the planner is actually the issue that we want to talk about, right?
Paperless Movement, your productivity, your way.
Paco, why is this such an issue that people need to understand the difference between a calendar and a planner and a task manager?
Hello, everybody. Well, I think it's an issue because if you don't really understand, and that's why we always come back to topics that may seem the same thing, but the point is that there are so many nuances into these topics that each one can resonate to anyone at any moment. And the moment that something really makes that click, that aha moment, is the moment that you really understand. And this is so different that, for instance, for each of these areas, like a task manager, a calendar, or a planner, you can find specifically designed tools for every purpose. The point is that everyone tries to, or most of the people try to use just one to cover all these topics. And I think that that's where the mess starts, because the moment that you start mixing things up, then it becomes chaotic the moment that you are dealing with a lot of these type of elements. If you are dealing with a lot of tasks, if you got many events in your calendar, and then if you're trying to organize how you manage your time, then it's a moment that you start suffering because everything is cluttered up. And that's the main purpose of this podcast episode, that it's trying to bring clarity, splitting the different concepts, and based on that, no matter that at the end, maybe you are just using one tool for all these purposes, but the point is that you will literally use it totally in a totally different way. And that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
It's not the tool itself, but how you use it.
And we see already Volker in the chat, as he says, single source of truth and planning versus task management was my two main takeaways of the iCore journey. So that's great. And these are two core concepts inside the iCore methodology. And I think seeing single source of truth, that's a topic we should tackle next week. But let's focus on planning versus task management. And you talked already about these understanding of the different concepts, but also understanding the different types of information and the different types of action, something that we keep repeating as well. The moment you realize that there are actually different types of these things, it makes it much easier to understand in what tools these things should go. So when we say, where should a task live? Then there's the question, what type of task is this? So in our setup, it would be two different tools that it could go into, which would be Todoist if it is a speedy and it's a personal task, or is it ClickUp, where we have the deep work tasks going on, and is it project related? Does the team need to know? Things like that. But we're not going into this. That's the general planning of these tasks during the week. But now is the moment where we are in the personal side, where you organize yourself once you're back on your desktop. You got all the tasks ordered, you got all the priorities that you need to know for the week, what you need to work on. But how do you organize yourself now in order to get the things done in this week? So let's say you've been in a meeting on Monday. What we always encourage is the agenda meeting on Mondays, where the team discusses what needs to get done this week. And in this week, you get 5 tasks that the team considers is crucial to move projects forwards, to achieve the goals eventually, thanks to this as well. So Paco, you get the 5 tasks, okay? Your 5 weekly goals. Now you go back to your desktop. What do you do next?
Well, I
think drink a coffee. Then I chat with people and I start interrupting others with their work. Now, what do you do then?
That's it, so that someone can get the shit done. No, the point is separating the concept. One thing is having lists of things that you need to do, okay? Some other thing is how you manage your time. I mean, when are you going to dedicate the time to what things? Okay. And another different thing is the events, the meetings, the things, all those appointments that you have with third parties, third people. Okay. That those are what we call constraints. Okay. Those are constraints because you cannot avoid, well, you shouldn't. Okay. You can start canceling all the meetings and that's it. But it's not the normal way of doing these things. So that's why if you separate events in just a tool, okay, and that's the main purpose of a calendar, okay, is storing and managing events, okay, and there are specifically designed tools for doing that. I think that the moment that you create those different three approaches between things to do, how I manage my time, and events I cannot avoid because it's not an appointment with myself, that's something that many people do, okay? When they start time blocking or they want to book a slot in a calendar or whatever, they create an appointment to themselves. And so that's for me, well, it's contradictory, okay? It brings things pretty unclear, I think, and it removes all the clarity because here, just by separating these three concepts that I think that they are pretty easy to understand, then you can perfectly decide and choose the right tool to store those elements. We will see later on how the workflow, but I think that the moment that you can perfectly store in a millisecond any of these type of items, of objects, okay, I think that that brings a lot of clarity, okay, because I think that that's the first obstacle that people, especially busy professionals in the middle of the storm, suffer with, because it's something emerges and what do I do? Where do I store so that I can keep doing the thing that I'm doing, knowing that I have the control, okay, over it. And I think that making this differentiation of time management, task management, and event management, okay, brings clarity and peace of mind to the people, because now you know how to store it, okay, and then we can move on and see how we handle those elements, okay, because it's a combination of everything that creates again confusion, okay, because the moment that I say, well, when I manage time, then I need to dedicate time to my tasks, I need to dedicate time to my events, and I need to dedicate time to even organize myself and decide what I'm gonna do and when I'm gonna do it. And
Yeah.
that's the main purpose of having such a clarity, okay?
Yeah, so let's go through the example that I just brought up there. So I mentioned the agenda meeting, something that we talk in the project management area of the iCore. Do have this meeting where the team clarifies what needs to get done this week, so we stay on track with our projects and therefore goals. So then this was looked at in the project management tool where these things are organized. So the whole team, that's the BPM area, right? The business project management area, where we look at this. And therefore you get a decision, okay, these are the 5 things that you focus on this week, Paco. So now let's go back to the desktop and let's organize this. And now you're leaving the business project management part and enter the PPM, the personal project management part, or the task management part, if you like. And how do you process there? There's where then now the planner comes into play, right?
Correct, because what we do is that we mark as milestones on ClickUp. Milestone is a type of task, okay? It's just a way to identify those weekly goals, those 5 tasks that the whole team have considered that they should be completed, or at least dedicate a wide amount of time to those tasks, okay? So those are the weekly goals, okay? And in my case, or our case, as we use Sunsama, Sunsama has an integration, okay, with ClickUp. And the beautiful thing is that I can bring those weekly goals to Sunsama, okay? I mark them as, I think they call them weekly objectives, okay, instead of weekly goals. But the point is that they get marked, okay? They got a purple dot that I clearly identify them. And then I put each of them in one day for during the week, okay? So
but
it's
now
5. That's why we
let's
recommend
interrupt you
5.
there. Okay, so first of all, for those who don't know, ClickUp is the project management tool that we use at the Paperless Movement. And so in there, we discussed this in the agenda meeting, what to work on. So what's the point moving this task now out of ClickUp into Sansana, or do you actually move it out, right? So for me, there's an integration with ClickUp. That's the beauty about Sansama, that it's consolidating my tasks not only from my project manager, but also from my task manager, and if you're running like Paco does, running several businesses from multiple project managers into one place, which makes now all the sense just for this purpose to use a planner. So you have actually a mix of your calendar, which tells you where you have time restrictions, like meetings that you cannot avoid. And then you start planning everything around these restrictions based on the different tasks that you considered from the different project management tools for this week that needs to get done. But how granular do we do this? And there's no point in actually planning this out on the calendar itself. That's what people misunderstand doing this job there, right?
Correct, because for me, the beautiful thing about a calendar is that when I just look at it, I just see the events I'm committed to be on. Okay, those are the meetings with other people, and that's it. So it's not cluttered up at all. Because one thing is knowing quickly the meetings that I have. For instance, when I'm talking on the phone or whatever, I can quickly see my calendar and see the things that are really blocked that I cannot move. Okay, because the point of using a planner and moving those weekly goals from ClickUp to Sunsama is that the moment that you are on your desktop, you need to manage your time, okay? And that's why we use a planner, okay? Because that's the moment that we are starting to figuring out the day, the time length, and whatever that I'm gonna dedicate to that tackle 3 weekly goals. Well, it's up to you. The point is clearly identifying in your planner those weekly goals, because that's how you never lose focus, okay? The planner combines the events in the calendar that it's something mandatory, so that's time that you have lost, okay? It's already lost because you cannot do anything with that, and the weekly goals should be exactly the same, okay? You put it on top at the beginning of the day, if that's the case, the moment you feel more fresh, okay? And when you can perform at a peak level, okay? But it's up to you too. The point is always knowing the restrictions that you have, and we force ourselves to put as a restriction those weekly goals. Okay, that's why they are marked with a red dot, purple dot, sorry, in Sunsama, so that no matter the storm, no matter all the tasks, no matter all the things that happen during the day, you never lose track of those items, those objects on Sunsama.
Yeah.
And based on that, then you keep managing your time. Okay, all the daily routines, they are represented by a card that it's blocking your calendar. Here we are not saying that we are using time, okay? We are just talking about this time that the block starts and the time that the block ends. It's just a block, and you are just forcing yourself to create sequentiality, okay? That's why we create the morning routine, then the weekly goal, or vice versa, then the meeting, and then it's how you can perfectly manage your time, okay? Because if something unexpected, you quickly move things up and down or delay to some other day, and that's it, okay? That's why it's so useful having a planner like Sunsama, because just using drag and drop, you are really quickly and fast managing your time no matter what happens, and it's pretty easy to plan also, because you can see all the workload throughout the week, and that's also important that you have a balanced week, and that's pretty important too.
Yeah. And this actually kills an issue that many people have. How many times since we launched the Paperless Movement, I heard this question: how do I estimate the time that I need to do my task or even projects, which is even worse, right? And we say, you can't. It's impossible to do it. You can get an estimate if you have a recurring task or recurring project, which we call work streams. Then you get an idea, because you're doing the same thing over and over again. That's the moment where you can track the time and say, okay, we need that time. Let's optimize this. And then you really have a measure. But for any project that you start out from scratch with all the bells and whistles that you need to go through, usually we always underestimate the time and overestimate what you can. You always underestimate the time that you need for the task. So when we see calendars full with individual tasks or 15-minute slots or 15-minute slots, that's just nonsense, because it ends up with moving things around on the calendar, and that's where the mess starts. So let's quickly recap what we just said. The planner is the place where the calendar and the task manager or the project management tasks come together into one place. So we see both the time available combined with the prioritized tasks that we have to do. And now let's schedule these things out. So you mentioned it already. If somebody during the week interrupts me and usually it's somebody from outside, if the team also works according to ICOR, then you quickly go to the plan and you know immediately, is there a place I can move things around? How far did I get in this task and things like that? But you have now a reasoning to say no to things, and that's very powerful. And I just want to also mention what Michael says here in the chat. He says, should there be rules around giving your team accessibility to your calendar and set up meetings? What meetings could be helpful so that I don't waste time being in meetings? I just need to be informed on what about decisions taken. So let me answer there for both. These are actually two questions. So one is, that's the normal in many companies, that people can send you invites to meetings. That's something I suffered from in corporate. I nearly got work done because I was sitting on back meetings the whole day. And in the end of the day, I felt unaccomplished, because usually sitting in 2 hour meetings and having a 5 minute part where you say something, and you cannot really work in these meetings because it's rude. So all these things I went through as well. So how to overcome this? Well, by having a system in place that tells you what to do, what you need to do. That gives you the power to also tell your boss what you need to do, because everybody agreed on what needs to get done this week. So therefore, there's this focus. And in order to avoid people sending you meetings, that's where the time blocking comes into play, but not the way as people think, right? It's planning out each task on the calendar. This is just the blocks where you do your routines. So you have your morning routine, and you have a block where you do deep work, something that we don't put on our calendar because we not send invites, right, to meetings. But if this happens to you, then block this out. Give it blocks where you have your focus time in the morning to work on these daily highlights, so you achieve your weekly goals. That's what you do there. And then the other question, what meetings could be helpful so that I don't waste time being in meetings. I just need to be informed on about decisions taken. That's a clear indicator that there is no system in place if you have such meetings. Because if you have a single source of truth where everybody updates the information and the decisions taken, then you don't need to have these meetings, especially if you just need to be informed about things. So that's where the normal way is to send out meeting minutes via email and summaries, and even worse, action items via email. But again, it's something that's very common and that you can overcome in your own company if you start building your system. And you will quickly see, the moment you leverage the system and people realize everything is under control, whenever they request something, they get a reply from you, they can trust you, then they want to have the system too. And that's how things change and the behavior change. And I can say this firsthand from my own experience, but also from our members, obviously. The meetings go away. I was full with meetings. The moment I started questioning why should I be in these meetings, asking for the agenda up front, and going not to these let's have a coffee meetings and things like that, this is where productivity boosted. And everybody knew, well, that's exactly what we agreed on this week, and that's what we work on. And this is a game changer. That's what we initially talked about, the single source of truth and the power of a single source of truth. We will talk about in the next episode, especially the part that it's not just one single source of truth, right?
Batching is something that works perfectly no matter if you refer to an individual organization or just a team.
Yeah.
For instance, creating our agenda meeting, okay, as I would say, it's like delaying everything so that everything can be discussed in just one go. That's important. And I recommend to have that practice with your closest ones, talking about the work. For instance, here in our agency, one of the companies managing, we got one monthly meeting for the different departments, okay, where all the managers meet together. Everything has been written down. It's the exact same approach of the agenda meeting, but with a scope of 1 month. And instead of interrupting or whatever, we just put them down, everything. Then we discuss that, and then we conclude the things after the meeting, and we create commitments for each month. So with that is more than enough. And also, I have to say something. Nothing's better than written content talking about productivity. The moment we start talking, it's just because the topic is so complicated, it's so full of subtleties that written content is not well enough. Okay, it's too poor. And also, it consumes time, okay? Much more than just talking, okay? When something is really complex, it's the moment to talk. And if possible, try to batch and try to talk about all those things in the agenda meeting just once per week. If not possible, well, create a meeting, but that's a meeting that has a specific goal, okay? Something, an outcome we want to achieve. It's crystal clear the people who should be at that meeting, because the moment that you have a goal, it's much easier to know the people who be interested, and also quickly create, using an outliner or whatever, the agenda, okay? The different topics that will be discussed, and try not to invite a lot of people, just as many as possible, okay? And afterwards, if you consider it's interesting, you can do a recap that you send to the people that may be interested, okay? But at the end, when you have a meeting, is to talk about a project, something pretty well defined. It should be pretty well defined. It's not something undefined that you just create a meeting and talk for the sake of talking.
Yeah.
It's something that is related to a project. It's something that is related to a goal. It's something related to any of the output elements that you are constantly working on, so that nothing better than a project management system where the team communication system runs smoothly, pretty fast, okay? Because the moment that everything is crystal clear, there's no discussion at all needed. And that's why those quarterly meetings or monthly meetings are just to express those blurry things or those things that are less unspecific, I would say, because from there you create something tangible, okay, and you create the projects that are needed, or the task, or new goals, or whatever, okay. But just doing that with much wider time frame, okay. The point is, when we consider that we need to have meetings every day to solve the things, that's the moment that everything collapses, because communication verbally with people takes a lot of time, or we use too many words, okay. We waste a lot of time. The moment that that compounds, I mean, the moment that you start going from one meeting to the other, you get exhausted, and then you cannot do not even shallow work, no deep work at all. Then things get delayed, and at the end, everything compounds, leverages, and you end up another quarter, another period that you set as control time, I would say, it disappears and vanishes, okay? Because nobody is really fully aligned. That's why that weekly meeting, the agenda meeting, is so critical, because you are gonna, the scope of a week is pretty easy to estimate. It's exactly the same as the focus and scope of just one day. You know perfectly what you can achieve in a day, and that's why we recommend in the planner just having 5-6 items per day, and that's it, okay? Because that gives you the clarity, because at the end, that's it. The moment that you have everything pretty well organized, it's pretty intuitive, and you know if you're gonna do it or not. And also, you're putting the pressure with those weekly goals to force the things and complete, so that you don't dedicate much time that needed, okay? You need to force yourself also to just deliver your best with that time frame, and that's it. If it's 3 hours, that's it, or 2 hours. And generally,
Yeah.
it's more than enough the moment that you are focused to deliver quality content.
Absolutely agree. And Michael agrees here as well in the chat. Good advice, Paco. Absolutely. I just want to emphasize again, there are a few red flags that you could recognize. If you have many meetings like Paco described, there's a lot of back and forth. Even worse, there's a lot of finger pointing, like, well, you said this in the last meeting and we agreed on this. And this should give you a sign that you have no system in place. You have no control of what is going on. Everything is based on this back and forth and the discussions, which is not only time consuming, but nerve wracking. And then that's the moment where you start writing things down. That's where people start sending emails after the meetings. But then you have to follow up on these meetings. So there's still no system in place. And if you really, truly work asynchronously, because that's what's leading to what we describe in iCore, then this is the power where everybody can focus on their expertise and really focus on what needs to get done until next week, instead of sitting in these nonsense meetings and discussing just for the sake of discussing it. And I remember many times sitting in meetings, looking around and just trying to calculate how much money this costs with all these managers sitting in there, what they get per hour, and the shit that we talk about. That's really, I cannot use any other words for this, that we talked about for the 5th time. And it's just because it was not written up. It was just somebody misunderstood, or people write this up in their own paper notebooks, and then they come back and say, well, I wrote this up. Why don't get a single source of truth and write it in there so everybody is on the same picture? Michael says, lol, I'm so with you, Tom. So true, says Mary. In corporate life, you're right, Michael and Tom. My day job is stuck in this awful weekly meeting. That's a word that you now throw at me that I cannot pronounce. Regurgitation. Okay, we better cut this out, otherwise it's embarrassing. Now, the thing is just, this is the normal. That's what happens. People complain all the day. So either they leave the company or they get fired because they're complainers, and they don't know the solution. So they switch companies, they go to the next corporate, and they will find the same thing again until you come to a place where everything is set up as we describe it, and these places exist as well. We are running this in the Paperless Movement. Paco is running it in his businesses, and thousands of other members implemented this in their companies as well. And so we know it's a business-proven methodology that we have there, and that's a fact. And I just wanted to get back, sorry, Paco, but I think that's important to mention before we forget. Michael also said, so do both you, Tom, and Paco use the tools like ClickUp and Sunsama the exact same way? Or do you have your own system, how to best use it? I get a sense that you both use the tools effectively, but individually. And I think that's a very interesting question there. And that's where it comes into play that the methodology that we explain is tool agnostic. So I could now go to Akiflow or any other type of planner because I prefer it, maybe, right? Maybe I have an individual style that I like there more. So I could perfectly set up the methodology in there. It's about the tool agnostic workflows that you have in place. Once you realize this, that tool really doesn't matter. You could use a Franklin planner and use this planner, a paper-based planner, much more effectively just by implementing these tools. And that's the key takeaway that we want to bring over here in this session, that the key is not how you use individually perfectly the individual tools, but that there are actually specific tools for specific use cases. Again, the calendar, the planner, and a task manager, and the project management tool that we described here. And there's a reason why there are individual tools for that. Sorry, Paco, I interrupted you, but I think it's important to point this out. So
no, and I think that any team member can have their own subtleties when using. I'm convinced that if we put in parallel showing how I manage to do it and Tom manages to do it, there are different ways of using the tool, no matter that the big principles are exactly the same, because each of us are specific individuals, specific human beings, and the way we see the things, and also our own reality. Okay, as Tom has said, in my case, I have 3 different project managements. Well, that affects, but the main principles stay the same, and we understand these concepts of working asynchronously, creating the weekly goals, batching everything to the agenda meeting, because that's what I was going to say, that the concept of relevant, it's something that gets diluted over time. Okay, the moment that something pops up, it seems like so relevant that I need to create a meeting to exchange this with somebody, and the moment that you start delaying that thing, it starts disappearing. Even with this approach of delaying until the agenda meeting, we find things that are totally stupid the moment that we start discussing them. And at the moment, imagine, they were so relevant that they were written down in the agenda meeting. That's something that you can better understand with something critical that had a deep impact in your life. At that moment, it was amazing. 2 years later, for instance, it's just something that you say, well, it wasn't so bad. No, man. Yes, it was, man. You can remember all the feelings. But it's also important to understand how our brain works, because the moment that we understand how they work, we can cheat it, okay? We can lie to him and take advantage of knowing how it works. And this is something that happens. Present, it seems like something, everything is life-changing. You know, that's why we also have, for instance, the idea incubator. Whenever you come up with an amazing idea, put it in the idea incubator and let's see if survives the pass of the time. And that's something that the moment that you start delaying the things, that's why people change so quickly of tools, because the moment that you see a tool, you say, wow, first of all, we are always looking forward to renew our lives. Okay, so the moment that we see something new, well, just for the sake of being new, it has to be good. Based on that you want to really promote and you encourage yourself to those new things, you find only the best points and best features, okay, that usually are the ones that are not covered for your current tool. And then you make the switch until you end up in the same situation that there are missing features, you lack things that your previous tool made perfectly, and that's what we need to remove, okay, by creating delay. It's exactly the same with inboxes. The moment that you put something in inbox and you look at it, I don't know, couple of hours, couple of days, couple of weeks, whatever the time frame you may consider, everything gets diminished, okay. The impact of that idea, of that thing, of, well, for me, it's something that I have learned, and that's why I don't get, first off, whenever I think something is life changing, I don't share it with anyone, okay. I just write it down and let it go, okay. I wait even for days, and then I revisit, and most of the times I conclude that it was stupid and a waste of time.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And that's, again, part of iCore that we differentiate, and that's a crucial part, differentiating between personal and business. If we say personal, we are not talking about our personal projects, building a house or making laundry or whatever. We are talking about the personal work-related stuff, knowledge and knowledge and action. And you just scratched two things there, and I think we should have another session just for these. One was the idea incubator. You said it as everybody should know. For those who don't know, it's another workflow inside the project management area of iCore, and that allows the team to have a place to put ideas in, and they will get processed the moment it's ready. So that's so crucial. That's another interruption moment. And Michael, with all these meetings that you get there might be some meetings in there where they have life-changing ideas that I want to share with you right now, and there's no other way. But if they would have waited 1 week, they would have concluded themselves it might be not so good. So therefore, we have this idea incubator. That's the business part. That's where the team shares idea already. But there's one step before that, and that's what Paco said. It's the PKM, the personal knowledge management area, where whenever you have an idea, write it down there and then think about it, then reframe it, maybe collect more information around it to give you more power the moment you present it. And then the refined version, bring it into the idea incubator, which is then in the business part, and share it with the team at the right moment, which is usually the agenda meeting, or as we do it quarterly, where we then go through the idea incubator and then we look up for the new things, because we have our goals set quarterly. So therefore, we know exactly what we need to do quarterly, and we are already fully booked for the whole quarter to work on things that move the business forward. So why should we focus on new ideas when they will be treated later on the moment it's ready? So all these things come together, and it's beautiful when the system works.
I would say something that it's the most life-changing ideas are your current projects.
Yeah.
That's the conclusion of this, because you have really thought about those projects or those ideas that are converted into project. You have shared it with the team. It has resisted, okay, all the different approaches, perspective, or attacks coming from the team members. So if that's the best idea possible, then forget about the rest, okay? Nothing is gonna be so life-changing, that, because also if you create projects that are really short, talking about the time to complete them, that for us the largest a project should be, it's a quarter, it's just 3 months. In 3 months, life-changing things are not easy to emerge, okay? So you can give it a try again in the next quarter and decide, because the moment maybe something is life-changing, but maybe there are other things that are even more life-changing depending on the current circumstances, because that's something important. Ideas are not life-changing just because of the idea itself, but
Especially
the circumstances and the all the things that surround that idea and the
Yeah, you
business.
say something very important, Paco, actually, because this points it out. A project that you're currently working on is based on a previous idea. How stupid is that to replace it with a new idea? So that's where you have all these half-baked projects, or maybe then tens of projects that you're working in parallel and you're not getting anything done. But as you said it, once we focus these 3 months on these projects, not only will something appear during the 3 months that we can save later, but we usually also realize by completing the project, complete new opportunities occurred that we would never have thought about during these 3 months. So it's really worth to get these things done and achieve these goals. And first of all, have the feeling of accomplishment each day that you work on something. Be safe and sound, that your ideas get the treatment that they deserve and they won't get forgotten. And then the third one is moving the whole business forward, upwards. That's the thing. So I think we covered it all today about task manager versus calendar versus planner, and let's say project manager as well. As we are working on a new product called ICO for Teams, that was just a teaser, right? So if you have a team who is struggling and needs some treatment there, we will double down also on this. And that was just something to mention. I think next time I cannot wait to dive into the single source of truth. There we go. Mary says already, ICO for Teams. Woohoo. Really appreciate it. We need a repetition of this again, please, Michael. Again, it's all in the ICO Journey course. Go over there, go through the project management like a pro course, and you will get exactly what we said there. What we do here is providing you more subtleties, more examples, and I think that's really what we need to have. I thank you all for joining today, and we cannot wait to meet you next week. Until then, have a good time.
See you guys.